This video is only for informational purposes, my findings, and a theory on a potential repair. This is not a 100% fix it, because it will most likely happen again. If you own a barn door style Samsung refrigerator with a pull-out freezer, you have a ice maker behind here, which looks like this. Now, supposedly, from what I've read, gathered on various forums or whatever, that there might be a seal issue that's letting in warm air. And this will most likely create a weird, moisture in areas that are not intended to be frozen. So, on the under tray, I'll show you in a minute, and in the ice hopper here and everything, it might be really clumpy or undesirable effect, and everything else will ice over. And I'm about to show you on what I did using a heat gun, screwdriver, and a butter knife. Really, you should use a screwdriver, but a butter knife is what I used. I didn't feel like going to this garage and getting that. It was the most immediate thing. So this is how it looks with the cover off. This is your model, right? This is my Icemaker production date here. This is how it's gonna look when you take the hopper out. Production date of 2016. Notice it's not there anymore. I dried it out a little bit. But there was moisture in here, meaning there's moisture in here and on the motor, but we'll get that in a moment. All of this was frozen over back here. And all the way in the back, forest end, it was a good, it's hard to see, so excuse me here, but it's hard to see. Sorry, it was about a ½ inch of ice just build up. I could barely move this. You're supposed to simply pop this screw off and lower this down, this tray, and then you're going to see a coil, which is white now, but it should be silver. It's just freezing all the moisture in there right now. See, that's silver. You have to be careful with this coil, but we'll get that in a minute. What I would suggest doing first is pulling the screw out. It's got a screw right here. Pop this tray off. There's gonna be a locking tab that slides in here and here, and just a pop off tab here. So you pop out, slide out. Push the tab in, pull out. Now, my unit was frozen, so I used the heat gun, turned it on high. Do not focus in one area. You will melt something. Keep in mind, your refrigerator is open this whole time, so it might start beeping at you or whatever. You're letting out all that cool air and wasting electricity, etc. So you gotta heat up in there as best as you can. I tried heating in the element here because there was clearly an ice form in there, and eventually I got it. It's a bunch of water dripping out and everything. When you're doing this, chipping away or whatever, you want to get all the hunks out, just throw them in your sink or whatever. But any moisture that comes down, you don't want it collected stay in the refrigerator. You want a rag to collect it, or towel. I'm gonna take this out for visual purposes, but you're always wiping or just leave it in there. Try not to burn that rag. Heat, heat, heat. Eventually, you'll be able to, you know, kind of maybe jostle it, like punch it or whatever, and wiggle it. Eventually, I was able to get the screwdriver back there and just chip away everything, because this is on a hinge, and the hinge needs to rock back, but the ice is now, let's say, behind my palm, behind, you know, on the back of my hand. So you need to get all that ice out. That's why we're picking at it, right? So then I was able to finally kind of open it, you know, play with it, heat up in there wherever I needed, and then it was smooth sailing from there. This tab here, it's trouble focusing here. This tab here pops off this black, yeah, right? And then you pull it back and then down at the same time. I forgot to mention, there's see this coil here? There's a heat sink, cool sink in this particular case, but it's a heat sink essentially. It's aluminum. That wraps around this heat sink. You need to pull this pull this coil down, this one, away from that. Be very mindful. You don't want to be too rough with it. You don't want to crack it, because there is Freon flowing through here. And if you break that, you jump the fridge. Do not breathe that stuff in, you know. That's a different story there. You pull this out carefully, not like an animal. Just be mindful of what you're doing. I'm doing this one-handed right now, so real trouble zooming here. All right, pull it out. Might be dripping or whatever, so get that rag ready. Mind my sink. Put in your sink, let it thaw out. While you're letting it thaw out, clean the coil off. The moisture's freezing over right now. And you clean the rest of the ice here. This hole here, I believe, is the water feed. Don't know. Or maybe up there is the water feed. Looks more likely. All of this was frozen over. There's some ice back there. You gotta pick all that off. You know, there is what looks to be ice, but like a clear surround around the styrofoam here. Check in there. Now, when you're heat gunning, keep in mind, do not hold it in one place. You have to move it around. You just want a bunch of hot air in there to kind of flow, you know, in exchange with the ice. Because it could get worse than this, but it's likely you're gonna warp this a bit. And if you don't have a heat gun, you could probably use a hair dryer. Well, heat gun's like $10 from Harbor Freight, I guess, something like that. So you see the warping here, I did that. I don't think it's gonna affect anything. All right, so assume this is all cleaned. Keep in mind, keep this rag in here. Wipe every once in a while. If you have compressed air or access to it, by all means, go for it. You know, blow some air in there, blow it all out. All right, so now we're gonna get to the other business end. We're done with the heat gun. All in all, you're gonna pull out 5 screws. 1 for the cover. And then you're gonna pull the 1 screw that goes into here. All right. You're going to pull this screw here. Obviously I took the screws out, but there's screws that belong in here. in here on the opposite end. There's a screw right here. This lifts up just enough. Don't force it. You might be able to take this off if you wanted to, but you don't need to. I wouldn't suggest doing that. You might break something, especially if you're not a handy person and very careful. Now, I noticed I was curious because I work on cars for a living, and like, you know what, there's probably moisture in this electronic stuff, and my curiosity got the best of me. And good, I did that. This was full of moisture. This is all wet. The motor was kind of frozen over. Who knows what water is in there or moisture. I pulled all these plugs out. All of these are easy to do except this one. Was this one? I'm sorry, this one at the motor. This one's a tricky one. You have to pull the harness this way and out. You can't just kind of pull a tab and pull it straight out like the rest of them. You have to push it out and then out. You have to kind of pull it out crooked. So once you do that, oh, I did skip a step, I'm sorry. Before we get to the plugs, there's a process in removing this, okay? And so that's partially why we removed this screw, this screw, this screw, all three, right? There's a tab right here, and this tab here. So what you're gonna see is something like this. I'm sorry, it's upside down maybe. My apology. Right, so you gotta pry this screw over. Again, excuse the low quality video. This is more for information. I'm doing this by myself. I don't have a camera person, so my finger might be in the way or not focusing right. Pry this out the way a little bit. I use the butter knife, but use a plastic pry tool or something thin, or a little pocket knife or something. And then you got to push this down. That's when this came more handy, actually. The regular Phillips is not going to work. You're going to want a flathead or a little pry tool. Push that down and kind of push it down this way. Not straight down necessarily, but just a little angle. And it pops right off. So notice the heat sink, it's all aluminum. The coil goes around this. When you're inside, you pry the coil off the refrigerator off of the heat sink. It has to get over these edges, and you slide it out. Just got to make sure you dry everything out. I'm going to put this over a AC vent. I have central air, so this is still cold, by the way. Maybe just cold from when I was had the unit inside. It's very, very conductive, seems like. Anyway, I'm going to put it there for probably you know, overnight or throughout the day, and let it do its thing. And then we're just going to reassemble everything carefully, plug it together. Mind how the harness goes in. Notice the bends that go into here. Slide them in place. Do that like here. It's hard to do with one hand on the camera. Like so. Pop the cover back on, should just snap right in place. Be mindful of any wires that may be protruding so you don't pinch anything, right? This sensor looks like it's important. Looks like an eye. Maybe to tell the hopper, hey, I'm in place. Let's work. That makes sense. That's really it. Hope this works out. I I have to look for maybe, who knows, maybe even duct tape might help, just to put a lining of it. Normally I would use foam around windows or something, but it's gonna be way too thick because this still does have to snap into place and not pop out. It still has to be close enough, I'm assuming, for this eye here to read that the hopper's in place. And that's that. Hope this video was informational. There isn't much information on these refrigerators. There's a bunch of inconclusive and non-technical forum talk and maybe one video on how to remove it, which helped me a lot. But this is a little more in depth than that video. Good luck.